My goal for this evening is to show off how Affinity Publisher works overall and start doing layout for my game Fate of the Galaxy, which I've been co-designing with Mark Richardson. So, so it's a fun little game powered by Fate Core, which is all about a galactic space opera. So galactic politics, etc. What this means is I have to keep that in mind as I set things up. So, to get started, I have a variety of stock art that I'm using to sort of communicate the tone, and I'll take a look at my art just to sort of get a sense of the visual aesthetic. So, sorry about that. So, generally, this is a game where you're playing the leaders of humanity, dealing with armadas and making your own religions and running your megacorps that are struggling to control territory, etc. So there's a sense of grandeur, where you're small in the face of a large universe. Sorry about that. I just ate dinner, and that causes me to cough for no good reason. So, the things that I'm noticing are this sense of grandeur, the sense of there's a lot of straight lines and curves going on here. So the dome and the vertical lines of the tower. A circuit motif. This is actually promising because it shows sort of that radial circuit interface that I can use as sort of an anchor. Another thing here, same circle and disc approach. So that sort of gives a sense of the kind of shapes that are more likely to be present in the art, and therefore more likely to be present in the layout. Because naturally enough, your layout has to align with the art that you're putting in it. So it's effectively a mood board. Now that I've gotten a look at that, I will head on over to Affinity Publisher itself. So, for the purposes of this specific product, I'm producing a quick start. So this is something that you would print at home off of your office printer to use to run a limited version of the game. What this means is I'm going to have to design it so that it can easily be printed on letter-sized paper, black and white. So I am going to make a new there's a lot of different options. I actually have created my own indie standard size, which is a 6x9 preset. But I'm just going to go into print. It starts with all the European sizes since it's a UK company. But then I will go down and I will find letter. I'm going to start with one page just to get started. Now, that doesn't actually look like it's the right size. That would get me doing the layout on full letter sheets of paper. Now, if I want to actually do the individual sides of the frame, I would do something different. But for a quick start, just just plain doing it on letter and leaving it at that will do the trick. So that's how I've done my quick starts in the past. So if I'm just effectively doing a spread at a time, then I want to turn off the facing pages function and make sure that the orientation is landscape. I'm also going to go in and set the colors to gray 16, because that will make sure that I'm not dragging any color information into this document. I'm fine working in inches. I shouldn't be. Honestly, I should be using something else. But inches are traditional in a lot of layout. So, civil. I've got 1-inch margins, and I'm not going to have any bleed. I'm going to... Let's boost the bottom margin a bit. Now, one thing, because I'm going with a sense of grandeur, this also means that I'm going with a sense of white space. So having slightly bigger bottom borders will be useful. So, now that I've hit everything I think I need, let's create this. So, some of these features are things that I've already installed and are just part of my normal workflow. So what we've got here is effectively this shape is representing the safe area, whereas everything outside of that is the margin, where we want to avoid putting too much content. I've got a grid on here, which is at 1/4 of an inch standard, so that I can generally align things to it. Now, snapping is extremely useful because it allows me to do things like this, giving you a sense of consistency that might otherwise be lacking. So when I'm starting off a project, I will typically do something like this, block out spaces with boxes, just so I can keep track of where the information can be. And this is normally called making a grid, for those who haven't done layout before. So right now I'm just fooling around looking at the idea space. So let's say that we were trying to do 4 columns. I would select all 4 rectangles, which you can see in the layer section to the bottom right. And then I align horizontally, space horizontally. So then that would spread them out. So if I was just using these 4 columns as my way of presenting the information, that would be how I would do it. Now, 1 inch is quite often very small, but what I'm actually doing here is creating units that I can then break things up across. So in the future, I'll be able to do things like put an illustration. Let's make a... So I could put an illustration that's across 2. Yeah, so you see that I wound up trying to use a color, and it stopped me. That is the desired behavior. So I can make something that's across 3 of them. I can make another column that would be filling part of this column, etc. So what you'll see I'm doing here is creating squares with the Shape Creator tool. Then I wind up going through and applying various fills and strokes to them. When you click on the fill, it will show you the gradients, etc. The colors, the gradients, and the swatches. So whenever you select a color, it will show up in the recent swatches, which means that you can consistently reuse the same colors or the same shades. So now I've figured out, okay, we've got a 4-column general breakdown. I don't know if that's honestly the correct amount. But because I know the text, I know that a reoccurring theme in the game itself is that things come in 3 tiers. So, coming back to that, I'm going to try expanding these out so that I'm running off 3 distinct sections. That means that they're each going to be slightly larger. So the question is, how much larger do I want them to be? So I've got a lot of different tools that I can use to adjust things like this. So everything I've been doing so far has been within the publisher persona. Now, if you just have Affinity Publisher, this is all you use. So you would have to use the existing tools within Affinity Publisher. Go to View, Studio, and Transform. That creates this shiny new window, which lets me see the X position, Y position, width, and height. So I can see that's 2.5, that's 2.5, and that's only 2. So I'm going to go and change that to 2.5. I'm centering it so that everything's coming off of the middle and it will expand out to the 2 sides. Wonderful. So I've created these 3 shapes, 3 columns. Now, is that good enough? Well, let's make it a little bit wider. Let's make it 2.75. There's a lot of trial and error. It's a fundamental element of layout. Because a lot of this is what looks good to the eye. And there's actually a lot of time that's dedicated to this step, which is the iteration, the process of setting up your foundation that you'll build off later. Okay, so I've got 3. So 3 columns for my grid. Now, I'm going to hold the same principles and make another grid, another set of grids that are going to be horizontal like this. So I made these ones 2.75, so for consistency's sake, let's also make these rows the same height as the columns are wide. So the height is going to be 2.75. And I can fit 2 of these. Yeah, so why would you create boxes versus grid lines? That's a great question. So what I'm doing right now is functionally playing around to look at it visually so I can get a sense of what it will look like when I toss down grid lines. I will actually use grid lines later on. But this is a good way of sort of getting a sense of things ahead of time. Now that I've got that under control, I can actually see a preview of what it will look like in the end by using this little feature. I don't actually have any outlines. It's just a design thing that shows. And in order to actually see this correctly, I'm going to try to find the appropriate function. Yes. So there's I can do all sorts of funky stuff here, but to get the full power out of Affinity, it's best to actually have all three programs in the suite. So the designer persona literally hooks into Affinity Designer. And that lets me do all sorts of detailed things on individual pages. You'll note that the page layout, master pages, all of those are effectively gone. It's just taking me to one specific page, and then I'm playing around with it. So the reason why I did that is because now it allows me to do all sorts of Boolean expressions. So I'm going to say anything that has an XOR. So anything that has an overlap of both gets cut. And I clearly did the wrong function. Sorry, there's a lot of playing around here, and I am far from an expert. So I will instead use divide, because divide is safe. So what that does is that creates a whole series of divisions where there's overlaps. So I can do things like this, which will create these perfect squares and gutters. So now that I've got that going, let's hop back over to Publisher. Oh yeah, I've got one more hiding here. Now I can actually look in the Layers panel, and it will show me exactly where the shapes of various things. So this is what my basic 2x3 grid looks like. So this works, which would mean that I get to effectively use these as my major chunks of the design. But because I'm looking for the sense of grandeur, I'm hesitant about taking this specific approach and using large chunks like this. So I'm going to try actually shrinking this down and repeating the process, but with smaller blocks. So because it's snapping, it's actually quite easy to get this set up. I'm just going to go in and delete everything else and see exactly. So you'll see that highlights show up around every object when I select them in the layer. That means that I can select the other ones and delete them. I've got a curve here that's just a leftover from the division. So let's make this slightly. Actually, for argument's sake, I'll change the transparency down to 50% and make the fill black. The reason why I'm trying it out this way is because it's transparent. The overlap of two objects with transparency will show darker. So that might be easier for me to get a sense of things. So I repeat the same process. Going through, basic, copy, paste. And here. So this is how it tends to go. Because I want to make it symmetrical, I will just haul this in, and once again, I'll use the alignment to space things out correctly. I'm just selecting them straight from the Layers tab because that way I'm not missing any of them. So there's my gutter. Now I'm going to group these to make things easier. Now, fun fact, all the stuff I'm doing here is actually legitimately useful tech that you're going to use later. So because it's a group, I can now copy paste the whole thing if I do this correctly. So this is a functional way that I could work. And I would be very tempted to just use this as my baseline. But because I'm trying to go for a sense of grandeur, I think that it would actually be important to have titles, etc., somewhere here. You'll see in the little image that I have in the top left, which is the teaser image for the piece, that I actually wound up putting the title below. That's a somewhat unusual approach, but I like the dynamic of that. So if I replicate that, what I'm going to do is make one more grid. So I'm doing this into the margins right now, which makes me examine do I need this in my margins, or do I just need this in my margins for everything that doesn't have a major title? So effectively, this space is going to be empty when I don't have a heading 1, a major heading. But if I'm putting a major heading, it's also going to be, moderately large. So what this means is I don't quite have enough space here. So I'm going to compress these margins. So I'm holding down Shift and using the up arrow. And because this isn't totally aligned right now, I'll select the 3, and I'll do the same alignment trick, but use it with the vertical. So and of course it's being extra slow. Yeah, so feel free to continue to put comments in the chat. I really appreciate them, because right now I'm just talking to the void. So now that I've got this more condensed 5x3 grid, where I'll be able to put text in, then that gives me more space for the title. So now this looks a lot more consistent. This gives me a space that I can use for a title, or I could also use, so I can also use that space for an illustration, for instance. A nice half-page illustration that can fill that space. And because it's a 5 grid, then I can also do things like the main text is in this large grid. That will happen at some point. Come on. I believe in you, computer. Friend computer, please obey. The challenges of using OBS and Affinity at the same time. But yeah, functionally I can use this for text and then use this for sidebar material or another illustration. So it gives me the fundamental building blocks that I can work off. So with that under control, I figured out what my grid is. Now I'm going to do the most important step in all of layout. Save your document. This is currently untitled, and since that's a terrible idea, I'm going to save it. Don't mind me, just looking at my... I have a few projects right now. Fate of the Galaxy. I'll make my own layout folder. This is legitimately the first crack at layout that I've taken on this project. Yeah, and of course you can't see everything, but so I just saved this as my... So I'm just going to call this my quick start model because I'm just... Right now, I'm just setting everything up from the ground floor. So, now that I've got this under control, let's start digging into... Let's start operationalizing this. So, what you'll see here are master pages. These are pretty much magic. The way that you use master pages is you put on certain elements of the page, of a standard layout, into these master pages. And then they effectively turn into the background of whatever you've got on your sheet. So, for instance, if I do this, then I can create a new page. Add a page, and I apply Master A, which means that page 2 also has these squares on it. And whenever I change this, I will also change everything else that has that master. So I'm going to turn this into a lighter gray to show the visual weight. So this one has the distinct objects, but this one has the master A attached to it. So anything I do to here changes that. So why would I want to do master pages? Well, there's a number of things. First of all, I can start playing around with things like page numbers. So let's say that I've got my page number here, just for argument's sake. The peril of... Sorry, it is lagging like nobody's business. All right. So artistic text. I'll just start with a big one. So that's where the page number is. It will replicate on all of the pages. So I'm going in here, and I am doing text, insert, and it won't actually show you, but it's insert fields page number. So it turns into a hash, which means that it's just going to show whatever the actual page number is. So just to get started, I'm just going to say that this is going to be significantly smaller. Let's just call this Arial 12 and call it a day. There's a lot of very useful and intuitive hotkeys that I use all the time. Like right now, this is zoomed way out just so I can get a sense of the broader structure of things. So for instance, I might actually say, oh, well, the difference between these two is smaller. Looks like it's probably around 1.25. So I might want to actually increase the size of that, give it a little bit more room to breathe. So I'm just going to get my page number. I'll just center it and place it right in the middle. So you'll see there's a nice handy guide that shows up where it says, hey, this aligns me with the center of things. So I've got my master set up. And, oh god, having to manually change all the page numbers by hand. I've done it, but it's a real pain. So the reason why I went through all this hassle to set up the grids in this way is because then, so this is the magic. Add master. So I'm creating a new master, and this is going to be a wide image master. So I renamed it as wide image. This one's going to be my standard. So this master is treated exactly as a page, which means apply master to pages. So as soon as that actually registers, it will actually pick up standard. Oh, I think I applied wide master on wide master. Yes, wide image. So I apply standard on that one. So this little checkbox down here says replace existing, saying that you'll only have one of these going on at a time. Now, if you want them to stack, you can actually remove that and have 2 or 3 masters layered on top of each other, which is extremely useful because then you get all sorts of cascading styles. So you change master 1 and master 2, that changes the next 6 masters, so you can do all sorts of wacky stuff here. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to apply standard. Wonderful. So I've applied standard. So it's showing up here as a layer because that's what it is. Now, you'll notice something about this. I can't move these. It's because this is locked as a master. So I'm going to edit detached, which allows me to override that first master. So I'm going to do that thing that I said I was going to do, which is make a wide image. So because I know that this is going to be the standard spread that I use for wide images, I'm going to go in and say, all right, where's the appropriate group? Well, I don't need that group. So this shape is where that image is going to go. So I'm going to place a picture frame that goes right there. So now that I know where it is, I'll just hold that up there. And I build my picture frame, drag it over there. So it's not going to actually show up as much right now, but it means that as I go through things, I can actually just drop in images in that space. So now I can do things like apply master to page 2, apply wide image, replacing the existing, and then on page 2, I can use this picture frame, replace image, and go into my art. Yes, I have some amazing art on this project, and you'll be able to see more of it when we launch our Kickstarter. I'm going to put in this lovely spaceship. So this means that I'm able to put in this image, and whenever I use art, I'll wide art like this, I'll be able to do this. Now, I can still alter this if I want. Same principle, edit detached. This time I'm on a page. So I can, for instance, do something like that and have it going out to the edges of the page. Or even filling the entire space. Now, realistically, your office printer isn't going to be able to handle bleed like this. So I'm probably not going to actually do that, or at least not intentionally try to do that. But hey, this looks good. This is an interesting model that I can follow. So I'm going to... consistency is the key when you're doing layout like this. So maintaining the white space and the white margins and staying generally within the grid is very helpful. Now, I'm in a fun little place because I'm not fully aligned. There's a few little technical things I haven't done exactly correctly here. But that gives you a sort of sense of where's the weight. So this is a very bottom-heavy design that I'm working on. And that's fine. I could just as easily reverse things and put it on the top if I wanted. Using the top grid as my guideline. But I'm going with the bottom because that's sort of where we're putting the titles. It gives a slightly unconventional approach, and I think that will work well for this particular project. So this is all Jason setting up the grid. So what I'll normally do is I'll go through and I'll make a few of these. So I'll make another one. So let's go with another master. And this master, I'll also apply the standard grid. And I will, as I originally said, go in and place an image frame. So right now it's snapping to the grid instead of to the objects. So I'm going to get rid of the snapping to grid into the objects. And now it's just going to snap. It should snap more appropriately. So it's growing proportionally. And I will go in and say, okay, so this is where I want my images to go. And then I would use a text frame and a standard text frame here. So I've got a standard text frame where all the text would go. So now that I've got that under control, I'm going to go in, and I don't actually need any of these anymore. So I edit detached. And likewise, I'm going to turn this into a text frame. I believe there's actually a function that I can do that. Yes, convert to text frame. Now, text frames can also have things like colors. So I'm going to go in and zero that, which means it would work, but this is being a little frustrating. Anyways, so this is where I would put the title. And now that I've got these grids going, I finish this up. and this becomes my standard text with an image on the side and room for a title down here. I could decide that I'm never going to use this in a place that is the start of a section, in which case I could increase the size of this picture grid to fill up that title space instead. And I think that works for me. So Lesson 1, always pay attention to what's selected. So if I'm effectively stealing all that header space, then I can also extend the text frame. So this becomes a very vertical spread. Just like this is a more of a horizontal spread. So that actually leaves me with a question of, I've got 5 different boxes in my grid. How do I want my text arranged? I could always make my text in all of them. But one of the challenges with that approach is this is a full page. That's really wide. So what I'm going to do instead is create columns, which on the top right, I can do 2. I could actually do 3. I'm going to leave it there and see what 3 columns looks like, but I'm likely to change those. So I've set up that grid, so I'm going to go in, am I detached, edit detached, and nuke these squares. So I generally repeat the same process until I am satisfied that I've got all of the main grids that I'm going to need. Now, of course, I'm actually going to remove the image from this because I don't actually want an image, a specific image there. That was just a placeholder to make sure that I was I could see what it looked like in reality. So I drop in a picture frame. Now, James made an excellent point that I should just be using guides. And now that I've got that in place, I can totally use guides and set up standard guides to display that. So let's show the grid. So it will show you where all of the grid lines are. And it does this handy thing of marking that. Okay, so let's snap to spread margin. Shape key points. All right. Yeah, there's a host of different snapping options that I haven't actually fully explored yet. So I'm just going in and creating these guides. And with these guides in place, I can then get rid of the shapes and just rely on the guides going forward. I just personally like being able to actually see exactly where the weight of the grid is going to be. So, yeah, so all of this time, it's been 50 minutes, and I've just been working on a grid. Showing off a few tools, but yeah, so there's a lot of time involved with trying to get something like this set up. All right, so now that I've got that under control, let's go in and I'm just going to turn this actually into a standard text frame. Let's just make this white, fill, if this actually works. Oh, it's probably doing something wacky in the background. I think I know where it's going, what's going on there. But I've got these guides, so that makes it nice and easy to replace this. It actually maintains the columns that I had set up before. I don't want columns for this one, so I'm just removing that, which should register. 1. Good. So I'm just going to start things off by making this a 2-column, and then see if I want to move on to a 3-column later. Just for argument's sake, so I can test things out. Now I can safely go through and nuke these. So, now that we've got vertical image, wide image, and standard, let's make a new page. And I'm going to apply standard. So here's the next portion of getting things set up. Now that we've got some master pages in place, what I want to actually do is start dealing with type. So that you can drop in. So right now this is the standard page. So I can just type things in here. It's currently white, so you can't see it, but I'll swap out the text color to black, and it appears. Yay! This is just 12-point Arial. I can zoom in, see it. So I know there's a rule of thumb. I think it's 35 characters, or like 2.5 alphabets, in ideal width for a column. So I can drop in filler text, which I believe is just under. Where is that hiding? I don't actually use it that much in this specific program, but it's because I tend to just use my own text a lot of the time. Yeah, insert filler text. So this is lorem ipsum. So it shows off generally how it looks, how it weighs, and I can do things like. So that's the issue. I'm not exactly certain how the filler text is supposed to be used because you can't actually select part of it. It just turns into a single mass of text. But that's sort of what it looks like with Arial 12. Okay, now that I've got that under control, let's actually drop in some real text from the game. So I'm just going to go through the introduction. So this is a full document that I've already got, Word, Microsoft Word styles applied to. So in order to actually put this down, I'm going to paste without format so that it just posts everything as Arial. So everything is Arial. There's nothing funky. Technically, these are character bullets. They're not actually real bullets. So you'll note that I've got some spaces in here that are relics. So usually it's best to just go in and remove as many of the extra line breaks that are unnecessary, etc. Leave it so it's effectively pure text. Because that will let you test things out. So I know that these are bullets, so I'm just going to delete these base bullets. And because of the lag, it decided to delete more than I wanted. Yeah, the curse of lag. Okay, so I know that this is going to be the introduction section. Now, there's when I want to be doing layout, I want to establish a set of paragraph styles. These are going to be the standard font sizes, font locations, wacky effects, etc. Now, introduction is going to be a header 1. It's going to be the biggest header I've got, which means it actually won't be here. It's going to go in that special space, which I've got down here, the second text frame. So I'm going to put introduction in here. So what do I want something in this space to look like? That's the key question. So I'm going to select it. And, well, obviously it's going to be centered. That's how the layout's going. Just for argument's sake, let's make it something like 36. Okay, great. Now, I have a robust selection of typefaces. And I would normally just go through here and try some of these out just to get a sense of what's the message that it's giving me. So, Anurati is actually, when it's all caps, it's not bad. It's science fiction-y. So I'm going to actually text capitalization all caps. So if I that didn't work as I hoped. Yeah, so there's a lot of Roboto thin. Yep, that actually would work. Well, let's try that. This lag is annoying me. So, Roboto. Where is Roboto thin? There's only a thin italic. Okay, I'll go with Roboto light. And that's not bad. Yeah, that's fair. So this is a perfectly workable approach on first glance. I'm going to go to preview so I can see it. Now, there's clearly something a little off here. It's unbalanced. It's a little too high to the main text. So what I'm going to do is select it and go, wait a second, it's aligned to the top. Well, we can't have that. So I'm going to start digging into the paragraph. So in the paragraph, I can do all sorts of fun stuff. I can figure out where it's aligned to the base grid. I can change the leading. And the like. And of course, I think... Yes, yeah, here it is. So center vertically. Yes, it's a there's a text effect and then there's a frame effect, and they show different controls. So do I have stuff after that? Or are you just being frustrating? Oh, it's probably because I have a line to the base grid. That is irksome. Yes, I am the expert. You can trust me. Oh, yes, it's a master frame. So I was trying to change a frame property. So it wasn't letting me. Because I could only adjust the text in that format. So Roboto Thin isn't bad. But I would continue to go through and see if there's anything else that might work a little bit better for the style I'm going for. So what I did in the basic version of it was Trajan, which is overused. But the key thing that I was wanting to do there is communicate the sort of that elegant, refined, and somewhat imperial look. So let's look at Saxo Grammaticus. So that's got a bit of that character. So I'm just going to see if there's any alternative glyphs using the glyph browser. As soon as this loads up. So I'm liking some of these glyphs that are in here. And sometimes they'll have alternatives that you can use. Yeah, it does feel like Art Deco. And a little part of me is interested in that, but... oh, yeah, and we've got some interesting ligatures. Yeah, I think it's my Art Deco reflexes kicking in. Since I did an Art Deco title case for one of my previous books. So, really, I'm looking for something that's got a elegant minimalism in the same way as Trajan does. Now, so a lot of this is literally just going through and checking things out. If you've got a font manager, you can use those. Use that instead. Now I've got more science fiction-y fonts, such as Solaris. Spartan is a classic. Which would probably work, honestly. So right now, I'm just going to head down and show off what it looks like with Trajan, and then we can also go from there. So Suprema is a nice one. It's a geometric, just like Robo. All right, so let's just go down to Trajan. Kama, I believe in you. Yeah, there's all sorts of completely terrible typefaces in here that I tend to just use for decorative purposes. I use Town for After the War. Trajan Pro. So, Trajan is overused. But it's overused for a reason, and it's used very frequently in things like movie posters. So it it has this certain amount of weight. So right now, I'm just going to use Trajan, but I'm going to go in and spend some time finding some alternatives. So now that I know that this is a Trajan 36, I'm going to go to text styles, and let's create some text styles. So Affinity Publisher will come in and start off with a handful of text styles for you. Right now, no style is applied to this. I've just been messing with the specific text and not with the styles themselves. So I should be able to apply heading 1 to characters and preserve local formatting. Now, if that has applied like it should, and I do heading 1, it should replicate that effect. It did not, so I'm just going to go in and dig into the heading 1 itself. So edit heading 1, font family, Trajan Pro. Let's make this 36. Perfect. So now whenever I select text with heading 1, it will be 36 centered. Now, I need to see what heading 2 is going to look like. So I'm going to go to heading 2. I'm going to make this, the style is going to be, instead of being on base, I'm going to base this on heading 1. What it means is that it pulls all sorts of information from it. So it takes the font, it takes the centering. Now I'm going to turn this into, so that was 36. So I'm going to go with 24, making it 2/3 the size. So this is what my heading 1 would look, my heading 2 would look like. And you'll note that it actually got moved under heading 1. So if I change heading 1, it will cascade down. I'm going to create a style based on heading 2, which I'm going to call heading 3. Based on, and I'm going to go in, the font size, instead of being 24, I'm going to make that 12. And let's make that expanded. So we have our hierarchy set up. Now, of course, I'm questioning whether my bottom header is going to be the ideal path forward here. But for now, I'll play with it. So I've got my headers in place. So let's look at our body. The body typeface is always going to be a challenge, because you want to make sure that it is legible, yet it reinforces the themes. So I am going, I could use something like Suprema, and of course all of these have their own specific sizes that they're meant to work with. Garamon's a classic one. I'm going to go with the sans serif because that is a nice weight of it. I think I'm going to use Intervogue. So yeah, I've got all sorts of interesting, like Hyperion might actually be a perfectly valid header font. I'll try that out in a sec. Since I can change that quite cleanly. So let's go with Intervoke. Okay, so this is what Intervoke text would look like. So right now, this is a sans serif, which contrasts with the serif typeface. So that's not bad. I'm going to... I think that changing the leading might be useful. So there's all sorts of fun stuff in here. So I've got... yeah, there's actually 2 Intervogues. Intervogue alt. I normally just look at the specimen and see, hey, which of these works better. And I can go in and spacing, and I'm going to go in and say that the leading is going to be 110% of the height, just so I can try this out. Okay, that's not bad. So I'm just going to go in and apply this. So I'm just applying the body typeface to all of this. So my first reflex when I look at this is there is something going on here that is pleasant. Like, I like the Intervoke. I think it's the ragged right that's causing me problems right now. So I'm going to go in and change that in the paragraph style for body. So this is going to be justification. No. Alignment. Yeah. So let's go with justified, last line, left. So because it's wide enough, that gives me these nice blocky lines of text that are going to work out fairly well. So now that I've got this set up, let's try and see what this is like with 3 columns instead of 2. So I'll just hop back over to here. Edit. Detached. Select it, and let's make it 3 columns. So how does this look? The first thing you'll notice is that we've got a lot of rivers, these huge white spaces, because when you justify text in a smaller width, you have a harder time constraining that. So I'm going to try... So overall, 3 columns actually doesn't look too bad. But if I'm going with 3 columns, then maybe the 12-point font is a little off. So I'm going to set this to 10-point instead and see what effect that has. So all of those huge rivers are gone. And I can do things like shrink some of these things, and I can get more text in here. So there's all sorts of little ways that I can adjust stuff like this. So let's see what this looks like. So something that I frequently do at this stage is I effectively back up and take a look at it with... I sort of unfocus my eyes and I see the blocks of text. So clearly there's something wrong with the bullets, and clearly there's something wrong with this. Yes, saving is good. Saving is good. Always save. Thank you. Um, so what I'm doing here is I'm adjusting the spacing. And that's fairly useful. Okay, so I'm going to go in and I'm just going to permanently say, hey, why don't you tighten up the spacing a little bit on all of the so I can change the minimums. I'm going to say that my desired is 95%, and my maximum width between words is 115. I'm also going to say I'm going to use some hyphenation. I mean, I'm usually not a fan of hyphenation, but it really does make justified text work a lot better. So that seems to work fairly well. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to do the same thing I've done before. So I'm going to say edit bullet 1 style and make it based on body. Then if I go down here, where is that high? Bullets numbering. So this is something that's actually more powerful in Publisher as compared to InDesign CS6, which is the one I've been using. So what you can actually do in here is it says, do you want tabs? What symbols do you want? And I can go in and grab all sorts of fun things. So typically I go in and I grab a symbol to go in and find what I want, or wingdings actually. That lets me go through here. Now I've got a lot of interesting options here for my bullets, but I think I'm going to go with a more of a star, because that it's a science fiction game. So I'm going to drop a star in here. Or maybe I'll, yeah. Come on. Yes, I'm going to actually apply that first, and then I'll go in and change the bullet. So once again, you'll see that the bullet has gone on under body. Edit bullet 1, and now it should let me actually do things correctly. Yeah, so I've got some standard ones as well. I'll just go with the diamond for now. I can always change that. And I can change the tabs. There's all sorts of fun stuff there. So whenever I apply bullets, that's what it produces. So I don't actually have the bullet style on here. Those are just bullet characters that got imported from Word. So I'm just going to go and clean these up. And I could do this in an automated way if I wanted to. Do a text find and replace and just delete all of these automatically. But for these purposes, I'll just do this the short way. All right. So here we have it. And apply bullet 1. So standard body is at 10, but bullet 1 started at 12, which means that it maintained that. And I'm going to also say that the spacing's a little large. So the space before, I'm just going to make sure that it's a little bit smaller. So let's make it the space after of 6. So this is what it looks like now. So of course, I would say that these bullets are a little too heavy for what I'm aiming for. So now I just go back in and mess around with the bullets for more. But generally, that's the way that I would set up that. Now, I have, for this sentence, I want to include something a little bit more detail. I want to add some emphasis to it. So what I'm going to actually do, in InDesign, they wind up having character styles and the paragraph styles in completely different sections. So you have to go in one place to apply your character and one place to apply. What they actually do in here is they simply mark them with different symbols. So I'm going to go in and put strong, which makes this bold. That's a little bit longer, so I'm going to go in and there. So now I know that whenever I do emphasis, that's what it will produce. Whenever I do strong, I can also use emphasis. So the strong and emphasis are automatically doing bold and italic, respectively, and those are just baked right in, which is quite handy. So I can use this for things like game terms. And you can do all sorts of neat stuff in terms of find and replace this specific term and always apply this character style to the word aspect, for instance. So that's useful. Now, I'm going to wrap up relatively soon, but this spacing seems weird to me. So I'm going to go into heading 2. So a lot of this is just plain, some minor tinkering until things look good to the naked eye. So that's too little spacing. So I have the ability to change the spacing. Actually, yeah, I'm going to add some spacing before my body font so that it fixes it for all the problems. So edit body. And space before. Let's make this 6 points. Or do I want this 12? Well, it's a 10-point font, so let's make this 10. Only between paragraphs. Space between. And let's make this smaller space between paragraphs. So, I'll just play around with this, try to find the right balance so that it's got the right visual weight. There's a ton of just trying things out. Um, let's space between styles. Yeah. So that's a reasonable distance there. I just want a little bit more space uh, between the vertical. So above heading 2. Sorry, this should be heading 3. Why are you saying heading 2? Bad heading. Bad. Um, right. And I hope I'm not boring you folks too much. Um, Honestly, a lot of this is generally just trying things out, seeing what looks good, seeing anything that you instinctively find doesn't quite look pretty. I mean, it's no more scientific than that. Um, but space after, let's send space before. So let's make that 18. Perfect. So that feels better from my perspective. It's got a nice bit of white space that's spreading this out, and it lets me do. It gives me a decent feeling. Like it feels like it's cohesive text. Um, I personally love this Q ligature. And I'm going to go in here and say, well, maybe if I change the color of heading 1. So this is what it generally looks like when I'm doing the process, setting up my styles in the first place. I'm not actually going to use this specific document, like this specific text, but rather I'm going to be saving all these preset styles. And then I'll dump in all of the text fresh, and then just slap styles on it. There's all sorts of fun little things you can do in here as well. You can do things like you always follow a heading 1 with body text. So you select a line, make it heading 1, and then it will automatically drop in the body text after that, which is handy. But yeah, so I'll set things up like this, get some images. I'll probably refine a few of these master pages so they better represent what I'm looking for. I've sort of settled on this 3-column layout as something that's going to work out fairly well. I'll change this page number, and eventually I'm going to want to have some decorations on here. So, as an example, I could say, well, I want a line across there, and I can use all of the appropriate vector tools. To make a line and even apply some brushes to it. And of course, I'm not even using any of the styles or other things along those lines. I've got a lot of interesting options here. So this actually is an example of something that doesn't work because it's at odds with the graphical style I've got. Likewise, something like this is a little too intentionally rough. It doesn't line up terribly cleanly. Something like this might work a little bit better, but really, I'm just going to go with a standard uh, a standard stroke. Let's call this a 2-point. And I'm going to mess around with the pressure. Yeah, some of this is turning into an designer. This is all Affinity Designer tech that I'm playing around with now. But by doing something like this, this is what I did in the core illustration. So that lets me sort of divide the space nicely. It aligns with the grid, and it gives me a more cohesive sense. I'll change the color so it aligns, so it's the same swatch. Uh, and I'll just duplicate this. There. You're slowly registering. So I'll frequently go around and swap between styles like this. Now, there's other ways that I can do this as well. There's ways to deal with decorations. So I could actually say anything that's header 1, I'll edit it. And I will go with decorations. That lets me actually do pretty much the same thing. Top and bottom, stroke, and I'll just replicate that. Make this 2, and grab the same swatch. And I will make this relative to the cap, relative to the cap height, and let's make that 0.1 inches and 0.1 inches below the descent. So I can do something like that, which means that I can bake it into the textile itself. So because I got those, it's always a little odd getting the ascent descent on that particular function because it varies a bit. So I'll effectively move this line up. But when I have that done, then I will wind up automatically producing this style whenever I apply header 1. And it will also replace this on header 2. This becomes a standard feature of this entire font. So I can then take it out of header 2, and then header 2 and header 3 won't have that feature. So that is generally going to be what I am presenting for today. I hope this was helpful to help you get started on making your grid, setting up guides, making frames, and oh, and while I'm here, just before I go, there's actually some really useful things in here. Edit preferences. Yes, there's rules on the filler text. You've got some color details. Where is that hiding? There is a grid manager that you can use. Yes. Baseline grid manager. Use baseline grid. So you can actually do the same kind of grid thing using this mechanism. Saying, oh, I want my grid spacing to be 10. I want my start position top of spread. Or let's make this 50. Yeah, so it will automatically make grids like that. That's another perfectly valid way to handle it, and then you can just align to this grid instead. I just haven't grown up using this specific functionality, so I'm a little rusty on it, and I haven't been using it. But this is a perfectly valid approach as well. So, and you'll notice that it messed up all my text because I hadn't set that correctly. Like, I hadn't set all the functions to use the grid in that fashion. So, that is going to be about it for today. Thank you all for joining, and I hope this was useful. Thank you.